How do you go about selecting from 1100 or 2500? How do you cull out the best or the ones to be included in your
Yeah,
book?
well, it's a very good question. It's a real problem. In fact, I even write about it in the introduction to the new book. On what basis does one make a selection? The fame of the photographer, how friendly we were, whether or not, I have opinions, that I can relate about them, whether I thought they were significant at a particular time in the medium's history, whether I liked the picture, as a picture, compared to just a bland record, of the person's face and so on. So I struggled with this for a long time and couldn't come to any conclusion. So threw all those factors up in the air and let them settle themselves. I just said, well, whatever happens, happens, So some of them in the book are pictures that I particularly like as pictures. Others I've included because they are very well-known names. I may or may not know them very well. Others I put in because they've been very important influences, in my life in photography, and I've known them over many years, so they go in. There are others that I put in because I felt there's a point about this period in photographic history, and the portrait gives me a chance to talk about those things. So it's a sort of random mixture of all those things.
Have you written all of the text yourself, or did you have someone else write an introduction
No, I wrote it all myself, yes, yeah. The introduction, and then each image is accompanied by quite a lengthy explanation of why I've included them, why I value them, any anecdotes. Normally, I print contact sheets, of all my preliminary selections, and then go through the contact sheets. I'm an old-fashioned photographer. I'm used to looking at contact sheets. Mm-hmm. And then I sort of check them and cross them off and try and gradually make a selection like that. But of course, if I go back to that contact sheet once I've made my selection, then I'm doing other selections and eliminating different ones. And this process goes on continuously. So there comes a point where you set yourself a deadline and said, well, whatever I decide at this moment is going to be it. I mean, I just can't count it, because, no one's going to notice any difference. It's just your own sense of rightness.
Well, but people will notice a difference, because if you select this one, but you don't include that one, the one who's not included is going to say, well, I wasn't included, and why not?
Well, I know, but most photographers go through the same selection process with their own work. So they understand, that not everything that you want to put in gets in. And also I've had quite a lot of experience in ranging exhibitions and including some people and not others, including some photographs and not others, of editing a magazine, 2 magazines, where I have to decide on who to publish and who not, and which photographs to publish and which not. So the more practice you have, the easier it is to say no. And it's also easier when you start editing your own work, is to recognize what goes on in the editing process, and realizing that ultimately it's very arbitrary and subjective. I'm sure I could double guess myself, forever, and I do. In fact, there's somebody that I decided yesterday that I'm going to include. So now I have to write another anecdote biography in order to include this person who wasn't in it, at all. It wasn't even in my preliminary selection. But it suddenly got into my head that I've got to include this person. I don't know why. And so...
will this person be in volume 1 or volume 2?
Volume 1, yeah.
Now you said about 100 photographs in the first volume.
Yeah.
And do you plan on the second volume of
100,
size?
yeah. It'll be like companion volumes, yeah. And there may be a third, who knows. As I say, I've got 1,100 prints right now, and I'm still doing them. So
Do you consider this to be a photographic history, or what value do you see for it?
You're asking very good questions. On the one hand, it's a documentary project. These are what people look like from the 60s, to the turn of the century. These are what the famous photographers of the period look like. So in that sense, it's purely documentary. Because I didn't approach it like a documentary project in the sense that making lists of famous people and, I haven't photographed this person, I ought to go and, make a special trip to photograph somebody. I've never made a trip, never met a photographer in order to photograph them. They're just people that I encountered in my everyday life as a photographer. And so in a way, that apart from the documentary value, it's a personal project in the sense that these are the people whose lives I encountered during my life in photography.
So it becomes also a documentary of your life.
Yes, yeah, and in a way it becomes like a personal family album, except the family is in quotes. It's a professional album. A sociologist called Peter Fialine, I think, put it best when he looked at my photographs, and he said, this is like a guest album, that you have at an exhibition, or at a hotel. These are the names and the photographs of the people that have intersected with your life. These are the people who have come into your life, and you have asked them to sign the guest album. And I think that's very true, So it's not documentary in the sense that I have rationally said, these are the most famous photographers, therefore I must go and photograph them.
You said that with each photograph, you've included an anecdotal
Yes.
description.
Yes.
Why did you do that?
Because a lot of the photographers will not be familiar names, to a lot of photographers. And yet I didn't want to write a cold-blooded biography, which you could find on a website or in a book.